Board games. We might be talking about playtesting with people, but we're not gonna shout. When people are playtesting your game, how can you help them not feel regrets and shame? Although that's a strong thing to say, we want to make them feel the totally opposite way. I After a playtest, we want them to feel and say, "Hey, that was good. I feel loved and I feel valued too." How can this be a thing that emerges from you? Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. is UK time. Time for Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blether. And today, episode 951, Value and Appreciate Your Playtesters, which was a topic suggested by the lovely Kirsten Lunde. Thank you for joining us, Kirsten. And what would you like to say about this topic in a quick 30-second intro, or about yourself for those who don't know? I mean, you're the mistress behind Ovation, the mastermind, and that's coming to Kickstarter soon. And I guess we'll be talking about that in maybe one of our future shows.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah. So Ovation was what got me into board game design. And also excitingly, most recently been working with you on Questable, which was I was fortunate enough to be the 2022 LDEC contest winner. And that's been so much fun. Yeah, and I'm getting to do a lot of playtesting because we're developing 50 levels for it. That's a lot of levels. That's a lot of playtesting. So playtesting a lot has given me a lot of opportunity to be a playtester, to do the golden rule with other designers and play test as much as you can in exchange for folks generously giving you their time. So I've been experiencing playtesting from both sides a lot, and I just thought some of those experiences are absolutely fantastic, and we should do more of that. And some of them have been not quite as wonderful, and I thought, well, we should talk about the ways to make it as wonderful as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, normally what I try to do on these shows is to name people when we're praising them, but when we have something that we don't like so much, obviously we can talk about those situations and those people might listen and know who they are, but we're not going to name them. And I think that
Absolutely.
ties into both of our values.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And let's talk quickly about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. Regular viewers might know that I've been having a really hard time of things. And yesterday, after a bit of an ordeal, I did finally manage to get another month's supply of pills. And I'm not going to say it's a panacea. It's not like suddenly, but like I realized that not getting the pills itself was a source of stress, knowing that, okay, after this time I've got to get another one, and then what's going to happen? Having, at least I really, appreciate a bit of certainty, and just saying, okay, you've got a week, but after that, well, I don't know. Like, that's not a great thing to have in anyone's life. I mean, even if it was like, oh, come back into the pharmacy each week, at least I would know that. But there was no way to know what would happen. But now I've got this. And so hopefully I will be making it back to London today. But even if I don't, then I will have, I'm at least not going to go without medication for the next 28 days. God forbid, obviously, weird things could happen. I mean, aliens could teleport into the kitchen and steal all the pills for some weird reason, but that's unlikely. So,
Just be
um,
sure to have video going.
yeah. Well, if it happens, that's all. Uh,
I think
Now,
it's great that you can just exhale and have that breathing room. It's important for all of us to have that there's a security in that. I don't know. I sometimes attribute it to my sun sign is Cancer, and security is just important to me. I need my little shell and my little space and my little home, and I need to know that security is there. And so, to me, that's just one of those things that you need, and you just need to be able to breathe and not feel anxiety about it or worry about it. So I hope that gives you lots of space to breathe.
thank you very much. That's really lovely of you. And I guess the other recent highlights was, of course, chatting with yourself, and I played the last. Well, it might be level 50. We're undecided, but it is definitely in the diabolical levels. And we discussed changing the discard rule because when I played this level, it was like, oh, it's fun, but there's a little bit too much luck in here in the order of what you draw. So maybe if you discarded two at a time rather than your entire hand of three, that might make it nicer. And is that a thing that we could do throughout the game? I guess playtesting will tell and time will tell how people respond to that. But it's a lovely thing, and I really had fun being like, oh, I managed to get halfway through, but then yeah, I'm not going to be able to make it. Oh, I finished with only 4. Oh, I finished with only 2. I finished with only 1, and one that was so close. But I've yet to actually finish the level. But it's definitely possible because you have done it, Kirsten.
I did it, just in case anybody thinks I was trying to torture you and give you an impossible task. No, I promise I did it until it succeeded. It was my 20th attempt, though I'm pretty sure my third attempt I could have succeeded, but I miscounted the remaining letters. I didn't keep track as well as I should have because I only had one left on that one, and I looked at the cards left and I went, I could have made these words. I know how I could have done this if I hadn't been looking for a particular letter that was out already. But yes, it's doable. It's doable with discarding 3 cards, but I'm excited to try it with only discarding 2 and having that little bit more of agency and control, and not being as beholden to whatever you draw in the order you draw. Yeah, you've got a little bit more of a chance there.
Because also that would then make the the mathematical ones a little bit easier when you're trying to aim for a certain number. That might allow us to push the intrinsic difficulty a little bit, knowing that people will be able to mitigate their luck, which I really do like.
But it was that 20th time. I can't tell you how satisfying that was. It was late at night, and I should have been going to bed. But I was so close, and I did it one last time and succeeded. I had to message Desiree, and it was late at night for me. Fortunately, it wasn't late at night for her. But
it was amazing to read, and I mean something like that. I can't remember who it was who came up with the term fiero, but that fist pumping emotions that only games really deliver, and well, only activities that you do yourself, whether that's a game or an activity or anything interactive of any sort, but any challenge completed, you're like, yes, I managed to do it. And as long as you feel like it's fair, then the more times you fail and the more you have to learn, then the better you feel at the end, going, yes, I did it.
Yes, there's a wonderful game that's designed by New Zealand designers called Regicide. I don't know if you've heard of Regicide.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so fantastic, but it is hard to beat. And it has that definite, like, oh, we were so close. I remember the first time my son and I beat it. And we're high-fiving like we just, won the Super Bowl or something. We were just like over the moon because it's really challenging and it's really clever and smart. And he's extra excited because they're working on a legacy version of it now. And I know that's going to come into our house and be another one of those things. But when games do that for you, it's just really, it's so gratifying. And I do love that about cooperative games because we share that together always.
Exactly.
You share the victory together. And so you're all celebrating at the same time, as opposed to one person going, yes, I did it, and they've won.
I mean, although having said that, I mean, you were playing it solo, but it wasn't like you against anyone else. It was you having this victory, and everyone else could share in that and think, yeah, well done, Kirsten, that's amazing. As opposed to being like, yeah, well done, but I do have this like negative feeling that you also beat me.
Yeah. We don't have that, but boy, it was the description I had to say was diabolical is a great description for that level, if that's one of our levels. So,
and I think that it does open up design space that I will be pondering. What else can we do if we embrace the idea that for the diabolical levels, you might need a pen and paper, because at that point, people aren't coming down and just saying, yeah, you know what, I don't know what game to play. yeah, let's play this on Diabolical. It'll be like, hey, I don't know what game to play. We'll play this game and we'll start on, oh, we'll maybe continue on fiendish at most, but once you get to the diabolical levels, that will be something that you plan around, and then you know that you're going to play that game. So I think that having pen and paper is an okay move for those. But
I'm so glad, because it's really gratifying that
and
that one.
that does potentially open up new design space, although I'm still not sure what that design space is, but I'm sure one of us or maybe some listener will tell us, hey, if you're using pen and paper, how about this? How about drawing a shape and then you need to fill in these shapes? How about you need to tick off all the numbers? I don't know, that's probably a terrible idea, but maybe I'll try something tree. I'm not going to give myself more to do, but we'll see. Anyway, I thought another recent thing is that the clocks have turned back for us, and we were just discussing the passing of the seasons. And I thought it was quite funny. You said that New Zealand Santa is quite at odds with the Santa that most of the world's population has. I mean, you are part of the global South. Although I think global South is normally intended to mean the impoverished people. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm
But
not sure.
but like you are on the southern hemisphere, whereas most media and everything it's comes out of the USA. Like obviously, USA is really pushing stuff so hard, and then Christmas is in winter, and you know Easter is in spring, and all of this makes some sort of sense, and then suddenly you've got a country where, hey, it's blistering heat. And yeah, tell us a little bit about that before we move on.
Yeah, it's I can't keep track of when the times are changing, because partly because seasons are still so strange for me, just because I'm not used to celebrating Christmas in summer. Summer is it's go to the beach for Christmas, which is so strange to me. And some of the pictures and stuff you'll see of Santa Claus, I sent an image to a friend of mine. I said, "This is Christmas. This is Kiwi Santa," and it was Santa with the red top on. He had swimming togs and jandals, and he was kicking it on the beach. And I just
Jandals?
it's jandals are flip flops.
Okay.
The little plastic.
Yeah,
Sorry, that I'm learning Kiwi-ese, so I say things like that.
Okay.
And you take your chili bin. You take your chili bin, which is an ice chest,
Okay.
filled with your drinks, to the beach, and you wear your togs and your jandals. So I thought it was going to be easy peasy because it's an English speaking country, but there's still language differences that I've learned along the way. And I've learned about Christmas in summer. So if we're dreaming of a white Christmas, we'll be dreaming a really long time. Or maybe white sands, although we have black sands here in New Plymouth that are beautiful. So it's special and different. But my brain hasn't quite processed it yet. I keep expecting to have, you have your cup of tea or your hot toddy or something or your hot chocolate for Christmas, and you're chilled, and that's not it at all. I mean, and all the gifts too. The gifts are, in Colorado, the gifts were like snow things you play in the snow with, and here they're swim stuff, stuff you'd take into the pool. So it's just a really different feel.
I mean, would you say that although it's maybe a confusing time for you because you moved over when you were already an adult and you were already used to the Northern Hemisphere way of thinking about things, having the heat at any time of year, having summer is a brilliant thing. It's a little thing which is brilliant. I mean, just having the sunshine. I mean, we are moving into spring, into summer, and you are just leaving it. And I think the heat is a big part of why I'm emigrating to Thailand, because it does make me feel happier. It makes me smile. It makes me feel, oh, this is cozy. I don't need to wear this big jumper. I don't need to put the house heating on. I would rather be sweltering and sweating rather than shivering.
Yes, and it's beautiful. I mean, you're never far from the ocean here. It is an island, small island country. So Hi.
Hello, Xate.
Sate, how are you doing? Yeah, we're so close to the ocean. So, if you are getting toasty warm, just go to the beach. It's absolutely a brilliant thing. So, no complaints on that. I think the hardest part is Christmas lights. We used to love driving around and looking at Christmas lights.
Oh,
But
because there's
because of the
hardly
time,
night time.
you can't do that until about 9 o'clock at night, which is a little late for my husband and daughter. Their bedtime is about 8:30. So
Oh,
we did
wow.
manage to go to a local event in our park. That there's a big light event, and we managed to do that.
Oh,
Where
and
am I?
just
I'm in New Zealand. Where's Bez? Yeah.
no, I think Kirsten's in New Zealand. I think because you were talking about these seasons, I assume it's about you.
Okay. We're both in a unique place, though. You're in.
Yeah, I'm in Glasgow. I'm willing to say that.
Okay.
But as we get into the main topic, feel free to comment, ask questions from like follow, and we'll talk about yeah, what's going on with when you're playtesting your game and people have been giving you feedback, or when they've just been spending time to playtest your thing. It's really important to make them feel appreciated, because this is the fundamental bedrock of game design. Seeing it played out, seeing it, the iteration of, okay, this is how real people play it. Oh, this is how the parts that at least this person enjoyed. And we talked about a few different ways to do this. Should we maybe go in roughly chronological order, starting from before you do the playtest, to talk to people about what you're wanting, what you're expecting, so that that then values your time as well as theirs? Because if I say, hey, this game is a crash and burn game, this is my first attempt, I just want to know whether there's something fun in here, I just want to get to know the fundamental thing, that's a very different situation to saying, hey, this game has been played a whole bunch of times. What I'm really examining is this new point system where rather than going 1, 2, 4, 7, 10, I'm going to go 1, 2, 5, 10. And so the cubes are going to be worth a bit more. I want to see if the game still works. And I'd like to just play it a couple of times and see how it goes with you. Then, by setting expectations, people aren't putting energy into giving you feedback that's a waste of everyone's time, but also waste of their energy. Yeah, what are your
Absolutely.
tips for before the thing starts?
Well, I totally agree. Helping set the expectation of what you're looking for. And also, I think it's helpful. Sometimes it's helpful, depending on how experienced the playtesters are, to let them know that you may be iterating on the fly. You may change things midway through, because sometimes you need to do that. You go, oh, that's not really working. Why don't we try it this way? And some with newer playtesters, they may not be used to that. Maybe trying to win or do their best or that sort of thing, and think, oh, well, that's not fair. But that's not really what the testing is about. So setting expectations and kind of being clear with people and saying, I may have to change things midway if it's not working, or especially when it's early on. I think that's really helpful. And is respectful of your time and theirs, to say, this is how this works. I really value you coming, and you're going to show me those holes that I need to fill and what needs to be fixed about it. And so, yeah, I definitely think that's probably the biggest key prior to the playtest. And then also key is setting the time and then sticking to it.
As saying that this playtest, including feedback, is going to be about this long.
And I tend to, I'm better at it about it. I've been doing more online playtesting just ever since COVID and stuff, but I tend to set a timer or keep an eye on the clock or something. And so I'll say, okay, we're about 10 minutes from the time I told you, not including feedback. So give people a little bit of a heads up when that's coming to wrap up. And I've had people say, oh, well, how close are we? I really want to finish. And I say, okay, well, that's really great news. So sometimes we'll go a little long but only if everyone is saying that, or if it's not a setting where, like in an online playtest group and there's another game that needs to be played after, where I'll say, I totally appreciate that, but we want to make sure we play as many games as possible tonight, right? So yeah, I stick to that because sometimes things happen. It plays longer for whatever reason, and what I commit to, I really want to stick to, because I want to hold up my end of the bargain with them,
Yeah,
and
you've
value
said
their time.
something, and it's respectful, especially when you're reciprocating. And I think it's interesting to note the difference between online playtests, where it's kind of, okay, that's done. Now we maybe get 2 minutes break or 3 minutes break, and then we're into the next playtest. And that's a similar situation to most evening playtests that I've been to, or most on the Sunday playtests at Jugged Hare in Victoria and London. But on Fridays, we do have the luxury of having decided, okay, this is for people who are able to spend the whole day. So that means that we start gathering in theory at 10 o'clock, although, yeah, I normally get there about 10:20, and then 11 sharp, we start playtesting. And the idea is that each slot is 2 hours apart, but each designer has 90 minutes. And then the half-hour time in between allows people time to grab some lunch, grab some food, de-stress, because if you do back-to-back stuff, it can take a mental load that by the end people will be a bit more tired than they were at the start. But having those breaks does mean that then, yeah, there's the opportunity for people to go on a little long. But again, everyone at the table needs to agree, okay, we are willing to forego our toilet break chatting time of half an hour and carry on for an extra 15, 20 minutes potentially, and to finish this game. And yeah, there's been times when I, as a playtester, have said, no, I need this break. And as an organizer, you do need to remind people the break exists for a reason. So, but if everyone is happy with it, then of course it's about being empathetic and listening to other people.
Absolutely. I think that break is brilliant. Oftentimes, doing Protospiel online, which is 4 days, 24 hours a day, basically. And I definitely will sometimes need a break, but there's other times where you just don't want to because it's so much fun. And that one of the people that was just playing with you is going to put their game up next. And so I've also done it where we just go and go and go and go and go. And you're right. By the time you're done, you get a little rummy. There's just only so much my brain can handle at that point, but it's so fun. So it's good to build in that break time to make sure that people are doing some self-care in there.
We also touched upon the idea of newcomers. So someone that you've never met before, is it important to ask any questions about them and their background as a player, what kinds of games they're interested in, or anything to get to know them before the playtest starts? I'm aware that sometimes there's no time, but is there any additional things that you want to do in terms of setting expectations, or so you can set your expectations for what feedback they will give?
I definitely tend to do that. Sometimes it'll be questions about maybe a game with the same basic mechanics. Like if I'm teaching Ovation, I might say, have you played any engine building games? Have you played Wingspan, for example? Especially since sometimes I've played with people who will they won't understand what engine building game means. And I say, oh, have you played Wingspan before? Or something with that kind of, things are getting more and more involved on your turn as you go along and you have more and more abilities. Just because that helps me to understand how to do the teach a little bit better. I can be more efficient and cut some things out by using keywords like engine building with like when I did the Game Artisans of New Zealand, and I'm teaching Shem Phillips and Sam McDonald and other and Andy who did Regicide. I'm teaching them my game, and I can use all sorts of shorthand, right? That designers understand, that skips over some of the lengthy description, whereas you don't want to do that and alienate people who aren't familiar with those mechanics, and it would be better to do a different style of teach. So I definitely will ask that if I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah, because you've done a lot of design playtesting with not only other designers, but also with people at the games group who are just saying, oh, we hear that you're making a game. Yeah, bring it along. And that's obviously going to be a very different experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important that we're as welcoming to everyone of every experience level. And I just so much appreciate, with the designers, there's a wonderful exchange where we get to test each other's games. But when I'm playing with those testers at the group, there's not a way I can repay them, really. There's not a golden rule where I give as much as I get in terms of playtest time. So it's really important to me to make sure that they're comfortable, that they're understanding, that I'm as clear as I can possibly be to give them a good experience. Even if they don't end up liking the game or the style of game, at least they've had a good experience with feeling like I didn't talk beyond them. I was speaking Greek at them and going, why didn't you understand when I said this formula or this thing that sounded so foreign to you, right? I think it's really important to make sure that they're feeling comfortable and welcome, and at least you're speaking to them in a way that's not exclusionary or
yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that what you said about understanding where everyone's coming from so you can teach the game better, that's just something that applies to teaching any game. And if you've played, I know when Wingspan came out, it's a bit of a stretch, but it was advertised as, well, if you like terraforming Mars, you might like this, which is, and I kind of get that, because Jamie maybe didn't want to use the word engine building because that's a bit of a, oh, what does that mean? And obviously in previous things like Tapestry, I don't think that's a 4X game. And so, whereas if you say, oh, if you like the idea of building a civilization, but in a slightly different, shorter way, then you might like this, would be different from saying this is a 4X game, because a 4X game has certain trappings. But
and with Questable, I definitely ask, how do you feel about word games, just in general? Because I find that can tell me some things, both about what their feedback will mean in terms of, this is the kind of player that, I want it to appeal to as many people as possible. So if someone says to me, I'm intimidated by word games, or I have anxiety about my spelling, or English is my second language, so I'm a little worried about that. And I always make sure to, first of all, tell them how valuable their feedback is going to be, because not only do I want them to feel at ease, but it's true. I want to know how the game feels for someone who comes into it with a little bit of nerves or anxiety, because I want it to be accessible for them. And so I say, I will particularly enjoy your feedback coming into it with that feeling. So please don't worry about being honest with me if it's stressful. I don't want it to be a stressful experience. So please be open with me about that. I really value that direct feedback. And definitely that's important, because I want it to be something comfortable for you.
I love that, because, and this is a horrible thing, sometimes we get people who want to come to the Friday playtests and say, hey, I've not played that many games, is it still okay for me to come? And I don't think there's much more we could do. Well, I'm sure there is some things we could do to make it, but we've already written quite a lot of information, and we don't want to go into, I think we already have like everyone is welcome and all that stuff. But people do occasionally say, and when people come for the first time, I think there's a spectrum. Like, we've got these super bold people who are saying, yeah, I'm a designer, I've made this game, and yeah, sure, no one's bought it yet, but I don't need to listen to you all. You just need to confirm what I already know. And then those people tend not to get on well with the group, to be honest, because order arrogance maybe goes away after a bit, after they realize maybe there is something, but like it can go one of those two ways. Then you've got people in the middle, and then on the other side, like my favorite people are the respectful people who are maybe designing a game, but they say, oh, don't worry, I'm going to listen to the rules, I've actually read through it all, and like it says, I'm not going to bring my game the first time I come along, and then the second time I'll bring, and that's lovely. And then some people take advantage of the fact that we've got slots starting at particular times. For example, one person can't make the morning or the last slot, but because it's 2 hours apart, at 1 p.m., we will be starting a game. So if you arrive at 12:55 and you tell us in advance, or even if you arrive at 12:59 and you tell us in advance, that's totally fine. And then we'll organize the day around you being there. And it'll be like, great, this person's coming. And then if you come along and every third or fourth time you come, you bring your own game, that's totally wonderful. And then you've got, on the other hand, the people that you've mentioned who maybe say, oh, I'm unfamiliar with this kind of game, or I'm not really comfortable with this kind of game. Do I have anything to offer? And telling those people explicitly upfront, yes, you have a unique vision because you're the person who might actually get us out of our blinkered, narrow viewpoints, because we've been doing this for so long. We've got all these assumptions that maybe you don't have. And so please tell us everything you've got to say. We would love to hear everything.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and just to let them know that they can be as open and that we're so appreciative that they're there. I think that's just truly valuable, and they are extremely valuable. You're right; they'll get us out of our rut or comfort zone in the best possible way. So I think that's great. We should encourage everyone to join.
Let's carrying on the chronological thing. Is there much to do during the game, during the playing of the game? I guess, is there a case to be made for being specially mindful of how much you change the rules, or how much you maybe give strategic advice to someone, or anything like that?
I definitely think I've been in playtests as a playtester where, and I hope I haven't done it as a designer, but it's easy to do, where the designer starts telling you how to play and what to do, and then I wonder how valuable my playtest experience will be for them because they've essentially played the game, right? So I think it's more valuable for us as designers if we can, boy, I need to do this. If we can mute and sit on our hands and just let them play, right? With the caveat that this just happened not long ago with Ovation. Ovation has a higher level of complexity, and one of the folks at the board game group that I play with is newer to board games, and so it was a complexity level that she just wasn't comfortable with. And she actually referenced Wingspan. She said, "I've had Wingspan since October, and I haven't figured out how to play it yet." And I said, I am so sorry that this is complex in that same kind of way. And I did interject on that because I could see her discomfort. And so I offered a couple of options. I said, it is totally okay if you need to step out, if you're uncomfortable. I don't want you to have a terrible time, I don't want you to feel stressed. That's not a good game night, right? And she's like, no, I want to stick around. And I said, well, I can help you and tell you which moves I would make and why, if that would help you. And then she started to grok it. It was interesting because I normally would not tell her the moves to make because I'm trying to see what players will do, right? But it was interesting because as I guided her through that, it took more turns into the game, but then she started making the decisions herself and going, okay, I'm getting it now, which was great. I mean, bless her for sticking to it. I felt really terribly that she was having such a hard time and was trying to figure out a way to make it better for her. because I know not every game is for everybody, and that's okay. And I
Yeah.
told her that, and I said it's totally okay if it's not your cup of tea. I'm not hurt or angry. That's, you're allowed to feel that way. But she's like, no, it's not that. I'm not getting it. And she seemed really frustrated, but wanted to stick it out. So I think it's important to, I guess it's like playing a game, right? It's a tactical decision. You've got to decide, if we can't, we have to sit back and maybe plan to not step in and plan to let it play out and see what the players will do with it on their own, but be ready to make sure that we're mitigating any harm or worry or stress or, you know, any bad experience. And I guess that includes if we're wanting to iterate on the fly. Most of the time, I haven't done that a lot, but because I don't have the confidence in what I'm trying. But I'm always impressed with designers who go, you know what, let's do this, and they just know what to try next. And that's because I usually have to sit with it for a little bit and ponder. But usually they check in and say, you know, hey, is everybody okay if we shift to this? We're going to go ahead and shift to this if you're all comfortable. And most of the time people are. But it is nice when the designer kind of does a check-in on that. So really it's that whole making sure everybody's comfortable. But otherwise, zip it if you can. I try so hard. And then it's fun too when if I could stop when sometimes when one player will ask about a rule and another player will jump in and explain, which is fabulous to just zip it and listen to, because that's really helpful to know, okay, so some of the players really got that piece, right? Whenever they're asking questions about the rules and you think, well, did I miss it in the teach? Is it not intuitive in the game? Is there something that's in the way of smooth play? But then if the other players jump in and go, oh, no, it's this, and this, and you can go, oh, okay, so that was just a hurdle, but it's not necessarily a hurdle for everybody. That's really valuable. If you can not talk. I'm talking a lot right now. I feel like I do that in playtest too.
I mean, this is the opposite of a playtest. I mean, if you were to come here and be silent, I would be thinking, why the heck was Kirsten even coming here?
Well, thank you.
But I think that there's something to be said for really what you said about, not being empathetic and listening and checking in seems to be the key thing. Now, when you're playtesting, when we do it on Fridays or with other designers, I think that almost always we play ourselves. And I don't know if that's because we typically assume the other designers to be okay with that. And there's a little fact of, well, we want to maximize the body counts at the table. So if it's I've actually not played in most of the games of my deck construction game because that's for 2 players. So it's relatively easy to get 2 players. But if it's a 3-player game or more, and I want to have more people at the table, then obviously I'm going to make myself part of it. And whereas if I'm at a convention or if I'm playtesting at a pub, then I will, with strangers at a convention for me is a brilliant way where it's these people and the expectation is they believe that this game will have some level of quality. I don't know if you will agree with this, that if you're playtesting with other designers, you can get away with a crash and burn. But I wouldn't I wouldn't take an unpublished game to a convention unless I had already played it several times with designers, basically. And then once I had done that, and it's already at the point where people are saying, oh, this is fun, let's play it again, then I might happily play it with people because I'm already confident that people are going to sit down and have a good time, which is what they kind of need because they could be doing a million other things. So they're giving me this time, not only on an average week, but at a time when they've got so many other opportunities around them. And that's such an amazing thing. Similar to if people are playing at game nights or something, it's almost like you need to be extra careful. And again, don't tell people how to play because some people want to make those strategic realizations for themselves. And as a designer, if you can step out, then you realize, oh, are people. But I will admit, there have been, with a game about auctioning cubes after winning an auction to become the auctioneer, and the worst games have been when people have undervalued auctions in the first couple of rounds, and then and maybe one person values it correctly, and then they have a slightly bad time and then by the end, everyone realizes, oh, this is actually what is correct. And sometimes on the second game, if they play again, they will start valuing it correctly straight away. And I had one game with two other people where it was like, oh, first turn of the second game. Oh no, I don't want. And I remind them, hey, remember this? You can literally trade this in for this much money. So bidding this much money doesn't do any harm. And maybe it was a bit much to express that, but yeah, would you ever say something like that to prevent it going off the rails? And if you have to do that, do you think that then tells us as designers, as potential self-publishers, or as advisors to another publisher, hey, this is information that we need to reiterate several times in the rulebook because this is what leads to a critical misunderstanding that might lead to a bad game experience?
Absolutely. Or even if there's some way to design into the game a fix, right? If there's some way to make a minimum bid for the first round, or I haven't played the game, so I don't know what would be appropriate. But yeah, that being conscious of that problem is super valuable. But absolutely stepping in to make sure it doesn't derail the rest of the playtest. As long as we're aware of it, we get some value out of that for sure. For sure. Yeah,
Now,
I think those are really good reasons to jump in.
Is there anything else that you would like to discuss about during the playtest, or shall we go to the post-game wrap up?
I think the only other thing, and I might be being a little hard on myself on this right now, is it's sort of during the playtest. It's right at the beginning of the playtest. It's a good idea to really rehearse that teach. I did this to a group of designers, not intentionally, but last week I was planning on playing Questable again, and but one of my other games has some inspiration and is a little similar to one of the other designers' games. And I said, well, I do have that one. And he said, oh, yeah, I want to play it. So I haven't, it was dusty. It had been sitting for about 6 months. I had to, blow off the dust. And then the teach was terrible. And it was painful to me that I pride myself on doing really good teaches. So I was just going, oh, this is terrible. I'm so sorry. And the fortunate thing is this was a group of really experienced designers and very kind and patient and stuff like that. But I would never want to do that with newer players or people who might have the anxiety about playing the game. So I would say we do need to be courteous to the playtesters and be ready for a good teach, just have that down. It doesn't always happen. Like I said, I'm getting on my own case here a little bit about that. But
if someone said, oh, can you bring out this game and you've not touched it for a while, I think the best you can do at that point is just say, yeah, I'd love to, but just to warn you, I've not brought it out for a wee while and I might be dusty with my teaching. And, their designers, they'll be fine. And when you're bringing it out to, non-designers, I think, again, by that point, you should have practiced your teaching with other designers. So it's, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's also part of it, being mindful that who your audience is and what they're getting out of it. But let's go to the end bit, because some people might skip the feedback entirely. And that happened to me once at a playtest where we got to the end. I was expecting to give feedback, and then the designer said, well, no, I just needed to see it being played, which is totally fair. But I think that my issue in retrospect was that I didn't know that up front. So I'd been almost preparing to say some things and, kept them until the end. And it was, that's I feel, I guess, not shortchanged. That feels a weird thing to say it, because it's not like the giving feedback should be valuable to me, but it kind of is, because it's kind of bringing closure to the experience. It's not just about bringing, because in a sense, the feedback, yes, the purpose of the feedback is primarily so the designer can corroborate the evidence that they saw during the game to say, yes, people were enjoying this, and put that into some context, ask some examining questions, follow-up stuff. But then also a big part of it, I think, is for people to have some sort of debrief, because you do that during a normal game. You say, oh, wow, I could have won at that point, but then you played that move, you did really well at that point, and I wish I'd seen that coming, well played, or whatever. And having a short, if we just say, oh, good game, on to the next one, for me, that's really unfulfilling as a player. I don't know how you feel. And I think part of it is giving that understanding up front. Is it, what do you think about the skipping feedback altogether?
That really gives me pause. I don't know how I'd feel about it, even with that preface at the beginning and saying, I'm not interested in. I mean, I don't know how you'd say that in a way that wouldn't feel like I'm not interested in what you have to say. That just seems very dismissive to me in a lot of ways. The playtester is giving, whether it's half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour of their time. I mean, goodness, I've played much longer games at Protospiel Online sometimes, or in other online playtest groups where it's well over an hour or a couple hours. That's all my time, right? And then that's multiplied by the number of people around the table. I think it's only right to give those folks, whether it's closure or just give them the sense that, give them a chance to have their time, right? To say, okay, you gave me all of this time. I will take 10 minutes of my time or 5 minutes of my time to hear what you have to say about your experience. I feel like that's really important, whether or not the designer is taking it to heart, and maybe some of these people will feel that it's wasting their time because they're not going to take anything from that feedback. But those players are not just, they're not just giving you their time to help you. They're part of your community. They're part of your support system. They're part of the people that will talk about, I got to play test X game. So treating them like their time had value. I think the least one can do is say, hey, what did you think? And give them a chance to talk to you about their experience. Sometimes I think I'm often surprised by what people will say. And I think that's true of when we're talking about the people who've had a difficult time or have concerns about word games, or were worried about being English as a second language, or English as a third language. Some of these folks are so much more educated in languages than I ever was in my U.S. education, and have this impressive knowledge of English as well as many other their native language, but they're nervous, and then they have really valuable things to say that help inform a better design for us. I just don't see a downside to giving the player even a few minutes to give you some feedback, even if it's, I thought this was great, right?
I mean,
yeah.
What if you are at the point of a game where you say, hey, I don't think anything's going to be changed except for this particular set of numbers, and all I really want is to watch the game being played out a couple of times with these new score values and to see how you interact with it. And then at the end, you say, thank you very much. I got all the information I really need by watching you. But
I suppose it would depend on my experience, right? Like, if there was something about it that made me really not happy as a player, or was a less than stellar experience, I would want to share that just for their own decision making. Like, does that matter to you? Because it may not, and that's okay. I may not be the market. And I've said that before, especially with, like, for example, push your luck doesn't tend to be my favorite mechanism. It's just not, but my kids love it. So I can go, this isn't my favorite mechanism. But here's what I liked about the game. And so I may not be your market, right? But let me tell you what my game experience was. But I sometimes have prefaced with, I may not be your market, so you can take what I say with a grain of salt, right? Like, don't take mine as the be all end all comments. Not that anybody would automatically anyway, but just to give context. I've had people say to me about Ovation, I don't really like engine building games. So that gives me some context of what they're about to say, which is okay. But I don't know. I guess that's okay. And certainly if at least they started that way. I mean, Ovation is largely unchanging at this point, but I still have done playtests, and I still have value in what people have to say. And a lot of times it's something I've already tried, and they don't know what I've tried, and that why that didn't work, or that sort of thing. But I don't know. It's good to hear. So yeah, I guess that's certainly better than thinking throughout the game what you want to talk about, and then being surprised. That's definitely the worst case scenario.
I mean, it's really interesting because there's, I mean, in the LARP community, there's a strong, especially the Nordic LARP community, there's a strong leaning towards a formal debrief, even when this game will never be run again, and I don't care to make this game better. This is the game, this is done, and this is the game. But what the debrief is all about is checking in to say, hey, is there, for like 10, 15 minutes, let's focus on how you as a person are different to the character that you just played, so you can help yourself come back into the real world. Is there anything that you did as a character to someone else that you want to share, that you are especially proud of? Is there something that you did that you are embarrassed by, that you want to apologize for? Of course, bearing in mind that your character is not you as a person. And is there anything else that anyone else would like to say or ask before we finish up? And this is like that final question. Is there anything else that someone would like to say or ask? I found this recently as a really useful way to close up things, because frankly, because of my daily streaming, I've had a lot more goodbyes with people in the past couple of years than I normally do. Normally it's just a kind of, okay, we drift apart and hey, goodbye. But having a special, okay, now this is the end of, after the show, I'm probably going to speak to Kirsten for like 1 or 2 minutes, but it'll just be a case of, oh, is there anything else you want to ask or say? And because I've had my piece, and that's an interesting thing to consider, the value of a debrief, not only in LARP, which is, let's be honest, more emotionally resonant than most board games, but there are still emotional stakes within board games. I mean, there's still a feeling that, hey, in real life, I wouldn't be such a jerk to get in, to scupper you in that way. I'm not that kind of person, but because it was a game context and I just want to express that, and hey, sorry that I got in the way of whatever, but I hope that was still cool. And then you'll say, oh yeah, of course. And I mean, I hope so. Or like I might express something about the way that I've been lying in a social deduction game for the past hour or whatever, I don't know. But doing that feels like it has some value. And if it is in a playtest setting, I guess we were actually talking last night about consent and power differentials. And by being the person who's running the playtest, you've assumed a position of power. So do you then have to be the person kind of to do a debrief for the other people to say, hey, is there anything that you'd like to say or express for yourselves?
That to me seems to be so valuable. And I mean, a side effect of it is definitely what they go away with, and would they come back? Would they come back and play test for you again? Would they? Are they interested in your work as a designer, and do they feel comfortable being part of your community? It's it just seems so much more empathetic and
Mhm.
inclusive, and it's an art form. I often have talked about, you're a visual artist and you're so talented, and I just love your drawings and your critters. I have no skill whatsoever as a visual artist, none at all. And I find it so interesting because it is an individual art, and then you take it in as an individual, and the feelings you get from it are yours, and the feelings poured into it by the artist are theirs, and so there's this individual response, whereas theater arts, which is I think I'm better at. I hope I'm better at, because I would just do stick figures with the other stuff. But but I've done theater, and that's this collaborative art, and I feel like where we're all putting our pieces together on the journey together and creating the art form. And I feel like game design is that collaborative kind of art form, and so um, drawing in the group is part of that collaboration and part of the art and part of the beauty of it to me. And game feel is so important to me. So I just want the people to feel included. And I think I told you when we were chatting before about this just happened. It was so funny because I talked to you about this topic, and then playing in the Melbourne group the other night. I was really tired because they're a little earlier, and it was getting late at night. So I was drooping by the last game. We were going back to back to back to back without a break. So I was getting a little droopy, and I wasn't talking a whole lot. And I pretty much was on with a lot of what the other two players were saying. And then the designer stopped and made a point of saying, "Hey, Kirsten, I cut you off at one point earlier, and was there anything you wanted to say? And I wanted to give you a chance to talk," which was so valuable to me. I had to thank him, first of all, for making the effort to do that. That was really, it made me feel very included, made me feel part of the community and part of the experience. And gave me a chance to even think about it. Although I had to apologize because I was so tired. I don't think I'm at my best with feedback for you tonight, but I did talk to him a little bit about the experience, and what the thing that he had accidentally cut me off about was just that I thought the theme was really cute and engaging. So it was a good thing that I got to share. So yeah, that's really important, and the feel of a game. I think I remember Emma Larkins doing a talk at something. It might have
Emma
been
Larkins, designer of Abandon All Artichokes, and has a few other games on the go. And yeah,
yes,
it seems like
yes,
a wonderful person. Also, I've not gotten to talk to. Oh, I should invite Emma onto. Yeah,
yes, you should.
onto
I can't
episodes
remember
of
what it
ours.
was. If it was a panel on one of the online cons during the height of COVID, or if it was tabletop mentorship program. But she did a whole thing game feel, and it just really spoke to me because the feel of it is and how people are responding. That's part of the magic of it to me is not just the mechanics, but how it feels. So without the human equation, and I guess you can see a lot of responses and reactions, but
I mean, I've
it's
heard
nicer to
it
hear it.
said, and I do kind of agree, that if the only feedback that you're absorbing is what's said at the end, then you're really not doing a great job as a designer. That you need to
Right.
be aware of what's going on. And parts of the skill as a designer is being able to read body language and,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, occasionally just outright checking in with people saying, hey, we are going to continue. We're not stopping for feedback, but how are you feeling about the game right now? And just in a couple of words, or giving them a thumbs up. I'd actually like to ask you about the thumbs up system which I've adopted, which part of it is frankly is for my benefit to allow me to get everyone's input in a much faster way, and also to allow people to not influence each other. I will ask, well, a question of how much do you like typically word games, and okay, how much do you typically like auction games? How much did you like this one? Would you be willing to supply your own cubes if I just sold the cards? And do you think that the game should be longer? And then like thumbs up means yes, I want it to be longer. Thumbs down means I want it to be shorter. And everyone's voting simultaneously. So I get these answers to the quantitative questions. And if people are all agreed, then it typically seems like there's not much more to say. That's kind of almost a sign, okay, we're all agreed. It's fairly clear. It was the correct length, or maybe it could have been slightly shorter. But if there's a big differential, then I'll try and ask the person, hey, is there anything else that you want to say? And yeah, but does the thumbs up system mean that not only is it faster for me, but even if it's just a visual thing, people feel heard? Or am I giving it too much credit? What do you think?
I think when I've listened to it, I think it has been really clever, because you are getting everyone to respond at the same time, which I think is really smart. Like you said, there's none of that sort of piggybacking or, oh yeah, they're just immediately responding all with how they feel, which is great. But and give yourself enough credit, because you definitely ask those follow-up questions. So because you've been kind enough, just to give people some context, Bez is fantastic about recording those for me whenever playing Questival. So I get to hear directly these wonderful feedback sessions. Yeah, I think you do a fantastic job of those. And it seems they all sound very engaged. They will sometimes offer up a reason for whether you ask or not, a reason for their thumbs and why they gave it that, especially if they're different from the other people. So it doesn't ever sound to me, and of course I'm not seeing anybody, but it doesn't ever sound to me like anyone's feeling like they're not getting enough opportunity to express their feedback. It definitely feels like everybody's engaged, and everybody's certainly equal. Everyone's treated equally because they're all doing it at the same time, which is fantastic.
And so it seems like if maybe that's something that could be adopted more widely, having this definitely yes, no, definitely not. I mean, it works for me. It might not work for you, but if you do have a series of questions that can be done in a quantitative, yes, no binary fashion, or along a single scale, then maybe it will work for you. Is there anything else that we have been chatting for over an hour at this point? Is there anything else that we want to chat about regarding the topic of how to make people feel loved? Because it's not just about us being efficient, it's about making people feel loved and appreciated.
I think the only other thing I'd want to add is that we do need to be aware of biases that we may not be super conscious of. And Elizabeth Hargrave just did a really good thread about male-dominated industries, and how that experience. There's sort of there are often these universal or almost universal experiences that then can be that have been had in different industries that are male dominated, and board gaming can be very much. I mean, certainly Elizabeth is great about pointing out things that are of concern, like the lack of women in the top 100 and the lack of diversity. So I think it's just really important that we remember that structures have been sort of ingrained in us that will lend us to inadvertently give more credence or value to certain voices, and we need to make sure that we're planning to be very equitable and inclusive, and make sure that we're cognizant of those biases and working to conquer them. And that can come from even those of us that are not that are marginalized ourselves. I'm of a generation when unfortunately, a lot of women had to just suck it up, because if you said something, it could ruin your career and still nothing would be done about it, right? So, not that I'm saying that not feeling included in playtesting is as bad as some of those situations were, but I'm of a generation where it was best to just be quiet if you didn't feel your voice was valued. And so it's important to combat that and say, you know what, I need everybody at this table to feel valued. And to heck with those structures that have been ingrained in us. We can do better.
Yes, and I think it's really important what you said, that even if we are part of those groups, it's possible for a gay person to be homophobic. It's possible for a dark-skinned person to be racist, and it's possible for a woman to be misogynistic, and it's possible for a trans person to be transphobic. I mean, it doesn't exclude you from having this learned bigotry from the society within which we live, sadly, because yes, there have been many studies to show that when women are speaking as much as men, people think that they've spoken, well, whatever the ratio is, people always think that they have spoken much more than they actually have. So that's
and
a great.
sometimes it's pretty amazing how you can be saying something very sensible even without speaking a lot. Hopefully very quick story of when there was a problem at work when I was working in for the city of Walnut Creek, and there was a technical issue, and it was overcharging people. And I was having to help people that were getting checks bounced and major issues in their real lives about this technical glitch. And I kept saying, we need to either fix it or we need to stop charging through the system until it's fixed, because we're harming people. And I said, what we should do is this. And I had the solution. And then I just kept, nobody was doing anything. And I finally went, that's it. The entire office is with me. We are refusing to take any more payments, period. We're just not going to take any. So somebody brought the finance director down, and he was a gentleman, and he came down and he said, well, why don't we do this solution? And it was the exact same thing I had been saying for months. And I wasn't a delicate flower about it. I said, I think that's as good an idea now as it was 2 months ago when I said so. So yes, let's do that, shall we? I was so upset by them because, like I said, I was getting calls from people who were like,
flag it up. I'm glad you did that. You stood up for yourself. And
I did. But it's tough. It's tough because, for 2 months I wasn't heard, and I was the one talking to these poor customers who were, they're like, my rent check's going to bounce. I was talking to banks and going, this was a false charge. It's going to drop off. Please remove this. And I had to get certain codes to tell the bank, no, really, we're not charging them. That was just a technical glitch, so that their rent check wouldn't bounce. I mean, that's not something we should be doing to our community, right? So, I mean, we're working for the city. So yeah, it was tough to not be heard for a couple months on that.
So make sure that you don't do that to your playtesters. Make sure that you listen to everyone and don't make assumptions based on someone not knowing English that well, that they don't understand the game. I mean, someone could be the smartest player at the table, but then they just don't speak the language, and maybe they struggled with the instructions, but actually their insights are better than anyone else's.
That has been my experience with the English as a second language folks. These are smart, really wonderful people who obviously already learned a whole nother language, right? They're so bright, and they're so worldly, and they're so experienced with different people and different language and different ways of communicating, and so they do a great job at the game. It's so fascinating that they'll come in with anxiety, but every time I watch, I'm so impressed with just how well they're playing, and that just because they came in so uncertain, and Yeah, if they're getting missed by other designers who are not giving them the credit they're due, they're missing out because these are some really brilliant
Yeah, I mean, from a selfish point of
contributions.
view, you're missing out. And from a selfless point of view, you're just being a jerk.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think the only other thing we have to say about this topic is at the end, and I would like to become a little bit better at this. I do think I do a good job at conventions and where people aren't designers, but make sure you do thank everyone and make sure you say to
Yeah.
everyone, like, thank you for all this, and I hope that you had a decent time, but it's been really valuable to me to get people like yourselves playing this. But even at a designer based playtest, not everyone is coming there just for reciprocation. So it's sometimes quite important to single people out. So, for example, if I was playing with Doric and Ellie and newcomer Jane Garvani, let's say, if Jane came over, so Jane Garvani is a real person who's helped me at conventions, but let's assume that Jane was in London for the day. I would make a special point of thanking Jane because Ellie and Doric are other designers where they are there to get feedback on their own things. And whilst they might enjoy playing other people's things, it's there's definite selfish motivations. Whereas, Jane, it's about, yeah, again, there's selfish motivations of Jane hopes to enjoy the game, but it's more important that Jane feels happy. And it's more important, and I hope that if Jane's watching this now, she doesn't feel super weird about me having. And what let's call the other person Alex. I don't know that many Alexes actually. And whatever name. Let's call them Susanna Migriefi. So I don't know anyone called Susanna Migriefi. So yeah,
Okay.
and it's just, hey, you've come here just to play. Thank you so much. It's been super valuable because you've brought your own insights, and I just want because you're coming here just to play, not to design, not to. I want to make a special point of thanking you, and doing that is, you know, saying that can mean a lot.
Thank yous are so special. I wrote a couple of cards for the first time in a long time, a couple of thank you cards for the content creators I'm working with on Ovation, and I thought this is a shame that it has been this long since I sent a thank you card. This is really when you get a card or when someone genuinely says thank you, it's so meaningful, isn't it? It's just you
Mm-mm.
feel very much that they appreciated what you did, and so it's yeah. I think we should do it a lot more in general, but
And
certainly
saying
with our
thank you
playtesting.
is like an implicit compliment. It's kind of like
Hmm.
saying, hey, you did a job that's worth thanking. You did a good thing.
Absolutely, it says your time, your person, what you gave was valuable. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Now, I've asked you a lot of questions. Do you have a question that you'd like to ask me and potentially anyone watching this as we wrap up to our question of the day? Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day can be literally anything.
Oh gosh, I forgot again about this, but we had talked about the time zone thing. Anybody have any pointers? Do you have any pointers on how to adjust when the time changes? Because I am terrible with
Oh
that
my
every
gosh.
time.
I have not had the best sleep schedule for the past week, and our time zones shifted on Sunday. So honestly, it wasn't like yeah, I don't feel like I do have any pointers. I'm sorry. The one thing I
That's
will
okay.
say, I do, however, feel like should answer this in some way. And so, what I can do is give you an amusing anecdote of a company I worked for where they paid you not for the well, if if you were on night shift, one time a year you would be paid 1 hour more than you worked, and one time a year you'd be paid 1 hour less than you worked
Oh,
because
how
they would
bizarre.
pay you from like 10 p.m. until 7 a.m. And so they would calculate that as 9 hours, regardless of whether it was on time zones. And then someone
Oh,
flagged that up, and then they said, well, we kind of assumed that you'll be here still in 6 months, so it'll all work out. He said, but what if I'm not? If I was here, I would absolutely chase it up. And yeah, too right. But yeah.
that is so bizarre. And that's
Uh,
in the UK.
yeah, this is, I don't want to name the thing, but it was a supermarket. And Curious Into It says, I'm still recovering from the move. The dog doesn't understand that her schedule needs to arbitrarily move. Wow, that sounds rough. And
Oh, the dog wants to be fed, right? Is that
like, I think
like
it's
wake
about the
up?
walkies because presumably
Or the walkies,
the
yeah,
walks
yeah.
are going to happen before Curious Into It goes to work at a certain time of day. And yeah, I mean, feel free
Yes.
to let us know what is it to do with walking times or is it to do with feeding times or maybe it's both. I mean, maybe
Both. Poor
there.
doggy.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really strange construct. My actual
Hmm.
question, if I can piggyback off Kirsten's question, is would you be in favor of just abandoning, um, daylight savings time if all the countries said, yeah, let's scrap this idea? And Curious Into It says, her body clock is very accurate and doesn't like to be messed with. That's so sad. Yeah, walks and food and more.
Everything. Oh, poor
And
baby.
I think everyone would be in favor of that, of just scrapping it. But
I
yeah,
certainly am. It always messes up my sleep schedule, something awful, and I think isn't the origination rural and with
it's too,
harvesting and that sort of thing and agricultural demands and needs, but things are so different now. Like there's technology, there's I mean,
I'm
yeah,
not
I
quite
just
sure. I think my understanding is that because farmers need to get up at different times of day, they wanted to force other people to shift their times around the farmers. I think that's what it was. But I think that if people really need to communicate with farmers, surely they can still do that. Like
well, and
one
these
hour
days people
differences.
can communicate with the computer in their pocket, right?
It's archaic and offers minimal benefits but maximum disruption, says Curious Into
Agreed.
It.
And you know
Uh,
what's crazy in the US? Arizona doesn't do it. The state of Arizona has
wow,
said
seriously.
no to, yeah, the Arizona does not
I
do
did
daylight
not
savings
believe that
time.
a state would
And
be allowed to have that
every other
control.
state does. Yeah, no, they don't. It's something if you're traveling around that time because I think I did that and somebody had warned me and said you better pay attention because you've got to build in that time because they're gonna be in a different time zone than everybody else in that time zone. So yeah, which
Wow.
that's just even worse, right? Just get rid of it so that
I mean,
everybody's on the same page.
after some ridiculous referendums that I don't want to get into in the UK, I think we should have a referendum to abolish the clock change, and that would be a good referendum.
A good one that most people will get behind. I'm sure of it. Would be
Yeah,
much less
and
divisive
frankly,
than some
it's
of the
not
awful
going to
stuff.
make a major disruption for anyone else. I mean, it's something where I was talking to Eric Royce, who's joining the Thousands of Show, who was saying, oh, yes, you're at this point, but the US has already changed their clocks, so you're going to change your clocks later. And so that's why, even though it's 5 hour or this much difference right now, it's going to be 1 hour more difference later on. So, yeah, and you struggle to do that without having some automation. Referendums aren't very popular. Oh, I don't want to get into that. Let's just move on and over to you. What you're up
I
to?
panicked about our stream today when I had to look at my calendar and make sure. What I usually do now is I put stuff in my Google Calendar on the time zone that the other person's in and let Google sort it out.
That's very smart.
So it adjusts on my calendar accordingly. And I just wanted to make sure that I had put our stream today at your time zone, which I did, so that I could be here on time. Because
Thank you very much.
it can be very confusing otherwise from this opposite part of the world.
So, today, what plans do you have, or for you because it's actually maybe that's a not that's a time zone centric thing to say. So what are you up to over the next day? That would be a better thing to ask. Yes, what are you up to over the next day? So I am hoping to clean up. I've got a bit of mess with. I'm actually looking right now, literally, at a bunch of takeaway boxes. One, two, three, four, five. Yeah, five. um, that feels slightly embarrassing. I'll put them into a bag. It'll be fine. I'll find a bin somewhere. It'll take me like there's stuff scattered around. I'll do the washing up. I'll water the plants. I'll stuff my stuff into a bag. It should take about an hour, and I will do that straight after the stream and get ready to go out. The last train is at 5 o'clock. I'm going to aim to get like the 2 or 3 o'clock train, which gives me a good amount of time. And then if I struggle getting out of the house, I've still got some buffer time. And the train goes to Edinburgh, and then Edinburgh to London, I assume, is still going to be the fastest way. Sometimes I go to Carlisle. I mean, it doesn't make much difference to me. I just change a train, whatever. Because you would think that the biggest city in the UK and the biggest city in Scotland would have a direct train link, but apparently not. Anyway, enough of me kind of whining about my transport needs. If after I've done all the cleaning up, I've got any time left, I might treat myself and read the tiny bits of Asterix. So
awesome.
before I head out, and I might, but that's what I'm planning to do. I'll get home and I will have a proper shower and stuff where I'm kind of comfortable with the shower settings and everything, because here there's all sorts of settings that I don't quite understand and it freaks me out, and I don't want to have to deal with that. But yeah, sorry people on the train, I might be a little bit smelly. I do apologize. I feel I should probably spray myself at least before putting on less smelly clothes. And yeah, tomorrow morning I will be doing a very quick stream as I hopefully get on my way to go to a Friday daytime playtest. What are you up to over the next day, Kirsten Lunde? And everyone watching, feel free to share. I promise I care.
After getting to bed, I'll probably unwind a little, get to bed, and then in the morning, I need to get a package with Ovation shipped off to the Brothers Murph.
Ooh.
I'm so excited. They're going to do a playthrough of Ovation for me. I'm so excited about it. But I do want to get them a little goodie and write a thank you note to put in there. So I'll do that and get that shipped off. And then there's a playtest group that I've been lucky enough to join. So I'll try and get some Questable done with that, and definitely enjoy their games in that group. And then after school, Sophie did say before going to bed tonight, she said, you know what I want to do tomorrow is play more Bez games. So so I think we'll be digging into our box of goodies that you sent to me and playing some more Bez games. And then I think that pretty much sums it up. And Friday night will just be a family night. We'll be hanging out together before Saturday with there's Outfest in town, and so we're gonna go celebrate with some rainbows and some trans flags and.
So Outfest is kind of like a pride thing where everyone's just proud of who they are and able to embrace themselves and be accepted.
Yep. We're doing that this weekend. Last weekend we went to the march. There was there were counter protests in various cities because Posey Parker came to Auckland, and so we got to participate in that last weekend, and that was the response was really positive and gave me lots of hope for our kids and the world that they will be growing up into, because sometimes I worry about what that world's going to be like, and it gave me lots of hope. So we're looking forward to Outfest this weekend so that we can just keep spreading the love.
Amazing. And at this point, I would, as usual, like to, recap and wrap up before we finish up. And Runa says hello. Hello, Runa. Yep, you're just in time for the recap and wrap up. amusingly enough. So we talked to, oops, wrong banner. I do apologize. Recap and wrap up before we finish up. So we talked about being the winner of the 2022 LDEC contest winner, but there's so much more going on. And when is Ovation likely to be on Kickstarter, by the way?
The goal is June.
Okay, so that's another thing that's going to come. But we talked about reciprocation, the golden rule when playing with other people. We talked about Questable and the level of having to use every letter in the alphabet, which is really challenging and requires a lot of calculations, the notion of the arrow and losing before you win. We talked about the idea of going into autumn or fall as, is it called fall in New Zealand as well?
Oh goodness, what do the Kiwis call it? I'm not sure. Honestly.
But we talked about our main topic, which is before you start the playtest, make sure to set expectations. Will they change the game during the playtest? After the playtest, what might change? What will not change? Because so they aren't focusing on the things that's already fixed. What feedback or inputs are you hoping for? How long is this going to go on for? How long do you need? How rigid is this going to be? Understanding the situation and being empathetic to the other people. You can ask questions to set the scene. Have you played other similar games before? This informs you how to teach, and it can be something good to know just for teaching games in general. Welcoming to folk of all experience levels. Make sure that you care more for the non-designers, given that there's an inability to reciprocate for them. Ask them, how do you feel about words games if you're about to play a words game? That will also inform you, well, can you jump them up to a certain level? Make sure that you express your love and appreciation for them up front. Thank them for their time. Tell them to be open. Do not tell them how to play unless they are uncomfortable, at which you can give them, I guess, it's ultimately three options, which is either to keep going or to step out and maybe you can take over. Even if you're playing, you are probably the person who can play two hands at one table, unless it's got lots of hidden information. Or maybe one player can be removed from the game and it can still continue. And the third option might be for them to keep playing with some advice, with some strategic advice from you. But obviously, when you give advice, you need to be empathetic to, does this person want it? Because advice that you don't want can just feel like, what's the point of me even being here? Make sure that you mitigate harm, you reduce the worry, and you reduce the stress as much as possible because people are more important than the game. Check in with folk before you change something. If you're about to change something in the rules, say, hey, given that it's not quite working, I'd like to change this. Is that okay with everyone? And I might have been guilty of saying, I'm going to do this, but I guess with people that you've played with a lot, you can shorthand a lot of stuff and just assume that people are okay. But especially with people that you don't know super well and haven't played with like tens or hundreds of games before, be a little bit more caring and let other folk answer questions. If someone's got to a rules question and says, hey, what happens here? Sometimes zip up and see if anyone else answers. Maybe even say that you're doing that. If everyone looks to you, say, oh, I'd like to check if anyone else can answer that. So if you just pretend that I don't actually know the game either, or I'm just another player, I'm not even here, depending on where you are. Be conscious of when games might go off the rails, because if you have to give some information to keep it going on the rails, then hopefully that's something that you can bring into a simple tutorial guide, like a separate learn to play pamphlet or some opening strategies that basically need to be in the game. Because for sure there's different levels of strategy, but if you don't understand that this is worth at least between these two levels, and above this is kind of ridiculous and below this is way too cheap, then you're not going to have a good time with the game. I mean, obviously there's a lot of nuance within that value, but you need to get people up to a certain level so they can even appreciate it. And some inexperienced gamers might struggle with that. Maybe rehearse to teach. maybe not wanting feedback seems dismissive, because it's all not just an opportunity to educate the designer, but it's also an opportunity to debrief and to get things off your chest. You assumed power by being the designer, and so make sure to check in. Ask, is there anything else you want to say or ask? We talked briefly about how visual feels like an individual I get to meaning. Theatre seems more like a collaborative process, and our games are kind of like that. If someone hasn't spoken much, check in. Be aware of the biases, because there are certain things like, the world is a very misogynistic place, and you can be racist or bigoted towards certain demographics, even if you are one of them. And of course, at the end, thank those people. And that is what we talked about today. And as always, if you feel like that's been a useful thing, then please do spread the word. And I want to thank everyone who's been here, but most importantly, I want to thank Kirsten Lunde for joining in the conversation and, in fact, suggesting the whole conversation. Thank you very much, Kirsten.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like we're making things just a little bit better by talking about how to spread the love.
And Runa, it's lovely to have you here for however long you are able to pop in. And yes, at this point, if you want to check out what I'm up to on future streams, check down below. I'm hopefully going to be in London for Now Play This, which is a festival, and I am technically part of it, but with a more performative game where people literally throw around a ball of wool and literally make a web of connections. And so it's shouting things you love, and then you throw the ball of wool between people who share.
I want a video of that one so much. I really do.
But if you want to check me out, of course, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places. And if you want to check out Kirsten, where do you like to be found?
LookingGlassWorkshop.com or LookingGlassWS at all the things, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yeah, I like how you've gotten a strong recurring identity. It's like Looking Glass WS. You don't need to remember anything else.
Yeah.
So at this point, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a lovely chat. And I think I'm just going to say lots of love and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching long. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. Now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching long. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.